Right, let's go. Welcome to Tom and Amy's Paranormal Mysteries. Tonight we are talking about haunted locations. Again, we are joined by Nick all the way from America, and we have a new guest tonight, a new special guest, Tommy, who's one of my great friends from work. So Tommy, first time on here. Well, basically, we want to know is why are you interested in the paranormal? Start off like, what grabbed you into the paranormal?
Okay, so I would say it's when I was young. My dad's apartment at the time. So when you're young, you kind of don't realise these things that are going on. It wasn't until I got older that it explained to me. I remember being there and stuff like the Xbox would shut itself off. The TV was like playing off the wall. Doors were slamming. Every night I stopped there, it was just like something was watching you. It was crazy. So when I was probably 13, I think it's when my mum told me about this and what had actually going on because I was old enough to understand.
Yeah.
That's when I started looking into it and becoming more and more interested on how it worked and what it is, which obviously nobody knows, but hopefully I can get some more evidence into it.
Yeah, I mean, it draws you in, doesn't it? Definitely just draw you in. So have you had a favourite experience? Have you had a best experience that's happened to you, or you still wait?
I've not really had anything, not really that I can count anyway. Still sort of waiting on that. Again, like I've mentioned to you, I've not really had anyone to sort of involve myself into this sort of stuff with or do anything, so I've kind of just kept it to myself.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping that in the next year we can experiment more and go more into it.
Yeah, I think that's great having someone who's fresh, like yourself, Nick. Like I think that it's awesome to hear somebody that's just starting into it and and not had that experience yet. I think that's brilliant.
Right, absolutely.
It's like a good surprise for them.
Yeah, like that, waiting for that moment to like, holy shit. So tonight we're talking about haunted locations. Now, a lot of people automatically think like if something's haunted, it's some big like haunted mansion, or it's a basement, or there's the classic horror movie.
It's got to look horrible.
Yeah, horror movie haunted locations.
Yeah, I think movies have printed something into people's minds, haven't they?
No, definitely.
Well, we say all the time it's movies and that, haven't they? They put that perception that it's so certain things.
Yeah, now I've got my own opinions on haunted locations, but what's your opinions, Nick? Like, can anywhere be haunted, or is it?
See,
does it have certain elements.
See, that's what we see in, like you said, a lot of horror movies. Like, when you see these haunted house films, they're always, large, usually intimidating structures. They just have this scary looking appearance to them, like from the very start that it's very it's a haunted location, or something happened within that location itself. And in fact, in reality, I mean, there are locations like that, of course. That's not necessarily fictional, but some of these other type of hauntings out there, they also will occur, like in areas where you probably would very least expect them. They may just occur like the house right next door to you, and it just looks completely normal. Like there's nothing scary about it. It's just like any other house in a neighborhood, or not just houses. Or it could be even like a restaurant or a school, hospital. It just sometimes it happens when you very least expect it.
Yeah, definitely. I do think that it doesn't necessarily have to be like, I think that there's a big perception like it's like there has to be a lot of tragedy there and there has to be a lot of death there, but it doesn't necessarily. I mean,
I think a lot of people always assume as well that graveyards are haunted just because there's dead people there, which is not always the case. I always think that's kind of a calm.
I think it's maybe one of the least haunted places, graveyards, because the soul is already departed. It's just the shell that's left, that's buried there. In my own opinion, but I do think that also a big thing is like the stone tape theory. I do think that someone doesn't necessarily have to die there; it's their residue that they've left behind. So, like, you get castles and stuff like that, and they've seen thousands of people over time through their whole lives from birth to death, and that's the energy from their whole lives remains in the building that gets replayed. That's
It's their essence, isn't it? If they
Yeah.
died there, it's like their blood that's been soaked into the stone.
yeah. I mean, what do you think, Tommy? What's your thoughts?
To me, like you say with the graveyards, I would totally agree on saying they are very peaceful places. I can't say I've really been to one and felt anything.
Yeah.
For me, I would say it's depending on what perspective you're looking at. But if I was to pass personally, I would want to go to a place of happy memory, like where I'd want to go to, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of them, I guess, if they've got an attachment somewhere, they're going to go to that place. You know, whether it be demonic, evil, or just like a typical spirit sort of thing, I guess you could say.
Definitely. No, I've noticed your background, mate. That is like perfect timing. Yeah, just about to. Hi, EVPS Paranormal. Thank you so much for joining us, mate. This guy's on Instagram, EVPS Paranormal. If you search him, we've got some cracking content on there. Certainly check them out, guys. But yeah, thank you for joining us. If you've got any comments, just drop them in. We'll certainly discuss them. But yeah, that background, mate. Obviously, the Amityville house, the Amityville Horror House.
What's one of the ones that we're going to look at?
Yeah, all the way over there in obviously Long Island, America. Scaredy Cat, nice to meet you, mate. Nice for you to be here, mate. Sorry. Awesome to have you on as usual. So yeah, I'll throw this out to you, Nick, first, obviously, because this is your area of the woods. Amityville house. What's
the crack?
Yeah, what's the crack?
Well, I have to admit, I mean, Amityville was actually my very first haunted house case I ever studied at a young age. I mean, I was fortunate enough to actually have, I might have said this before, but this was right around the time when the remake came out with, I can't even remember, Ryan Reynolds, who was in it.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. It was around the same time when they actually had because of the remake, they were selling off these box sets of like the first 3 Amityville films, as well as a documentary DVD. So that one, for some odd reason, brought my attention. And despite the fact I was only, 12 years old, I was still managed to actually get those films. And I don't know what it was, but when I watched, I was fortunate to see the original one prior before seeing the remake. But there was just something really about that case that just, to this day, I still don't know exactly why that one in particular. I guess maybe it's because it's just such a well-known haunted case? I'm not sure, but it's very fascinating.
In the movies, don't they portray it that the dad was the one that killed the family? But it's not actually the case, is it? According to the movie.
I'm not sure. I haven't personally watched it myself, but
you know what you've got. It's really, really good.
Yeah, I do need to watch it, I suppose. Like, if I'm talking, I do need to kind of watch it. Anyone that hasn't watched it, like myself, a bit of background information on it is, so the Amityville house it's a genuinely true story in Long Island, USA. It all started in 1974 when the DeFeo, if I'm saying that right, the DeFeo family moved in. The house is actually called High Hopes, ironically. Yep. Now, we'll drop this image in of the house. There it is. Now, the guy in the bottom right corner you can see there is called Ronald DeFeo. Now, he, when they were in the house, he actually shot his parents and his 4 siblings before he was eventually arrested and convicted. Now, he is still currently alive and serving 25 years, 25-year, excuse me, I'll start that again. He is serving 6 25-year life sentences. Let's try and say that when you've had a drink. At the New York Correctional Facility. and he claims to this day that he heard voices to kill his family.
But he's changed his story though.
However, his story has changed a lot over time. Now, the house has had is it four different owners over the times. Another famous group of owners was in December 75 was George and Kathy Lutz. Now, they had 3 kids. Now, some of the paranormal activity they had started almost like as soon as they came into the building. They had everything from door slamming, children seeing things. Mm-hmm. It did get quite horrific for them. And now the house is actually had its address changed to 108 Ocean Avenue instead of 112 Ocean Avenue.
Obviously, they were getting sick and tired of people keep coming there all the time.
Yes.
As you would.
Yes, and that was actually sold in February 2017.
For a lot less money than what it actually was valued at.
Sold for $605,000 instead of $800,000. So that's a bit of information. If anyone hasn't heard of Amityville, I'm sure everybody has. But Tommy, I mean, what have you heard about Amityville, mate? What's your background knowledge on it? Have you heard of it before?
So, in complete honesty, out of all of the talk, the Amityville isn't one thing that I've been big on.
Okay.
Not actually that knowledgeable on it. I have heard of it before. Again, like with the movies and everything, it might be a good watch, but it's not something I go to when it comes to movies, sort of thing. Because I feel like they're twisted, sort of thing.
Yeah.
I will definitely give it a watch because it does seem interesting.
That's a good point you got there, Tommy. I mean, because us and Nick, we spoke about this before, that the films and like that the horror film that has been produced on the Amityville Horror House has really dramatized it and
changed the facts almost.
Changed what it actually was, what actually happened. It is a genuinely tragic murder that did take place, and they've almost glorified that to an extent to produce this film, which is a shame. And I do, in my own personal opinion, I think a more like a fact-based documentary style film on Amityville House would have been better.
Oh, absolutely.
Do you know? Did they actually film at the house, or is it a different house, obviously, that they filmed at? Because it does look slightly different from the film, I believe.
Yeah, so from what I remember hearing was, no, it was not. They actually did want to try to film it at the actual house, but well, of course, nobody was living in the house at the time, but the state, either was the state or so I guess probably the mayor of Amityville, they said, no, you're not filming here. Not only, not only because of these murders, but supposedly what happened here. They knew that it would get too, it would get a lot of all this, unwanted attention, which they didn't want. So as a result, they ended up filming at a house in Toms River, New Jersey, which is the image of the house right behind me. But the difference was that's not what the house actually looked like when they approached it. They actually put like what do you call those like it's like a cover or something that they put over the house. Is like a facade. That's what it's called. Facade. Excuse me. Yeah. So they put facades over the portions of the house, and you can actually find a few images of like the behind the scenes from when they started shooting the film. Wow. But that's where they shot the first one. Now, if you look to the other, like at least to the other 2 movies, those 2 were also filmed in Toms River. However, for the original one, that was the only one where the actual interior was filmed. When they started doing the other 2 movies, they only filmed the exteriors outside the house because the owners then, they didn't want them back inside. But also it was reported that supposedly, if you guys have seen the original Amityville film, we're near the end where blood's coming down the walls. Supposedly the blood actually stained the walls. So they didn't want them back in. So you'll notice there's a complete difference between the original one and the other 2, because the other 2 are the same while the other one's completely different. So the interior for those 2 movies were shot in a movie studio in Mexico. So again, they had no other way to film it.
I don't know about you, but I feel like that the real house looks so much more homely than the one in the movie, just because of the look at it, the windows, the shapes of them.
Yeah, and they do change it for the movie, don't they? It doesn't, like it says, it's based on true events, but the big fact, like we said before, is that based. It's
they like to horrify it to draw that attention in for that sort of media.
Yeah, exactly, Tommy.
Because it purely is a movie, they aren't interested on the actual base of what happened and what it actually was. They're just doing it to create that image in your mind, sort of thing. Again, back to what we've said before.
Yeah.
Mindset.
There's a bit I've read in this book. It's Ghosts and the Paranormal. It's got some great stuff in it.
You got a lot for Christmas.
Yeah, this is actually from Joe. Actually, he's on the chat. Thank you very much, Joe. So the Amityville, Long Island is actually in here. And there's a bit here actually when George Lutz was in the house. He said he actually heard some noises at the bottom of his garden, and when he went out to investigate and looked back at the house, he saw a pair of blood red eyes shining out from his young daughter Missy's bedroom window. And rushing back in, he found her fast asleep. But later on, she did say to him that she had a new friend who was a pig-like creature whose eyes glowed red. Now,
sounds like
that's just one of the things that happened. Now, obviously, a lot of people have said that the Lutz family made all this up as a giant hoax for money. However, they maintained their story right up to their deaths, and they even passed a lie detector test on their stories to prove that they were real.
It was obviously real, or they really wanted that money.
I mean, either they're extremely clever and they've managed to get money out of it, but then to take it with you to your grave and still insist that these things did happen and pass a lie detector test. Now, that's quite compelling for me, really.
So I just changed the background. As you can see, this is what the actual house looks like itself from top to
bottom. Yeah.
So that's why you can clearly tell it's a lot different. It still has kind of the partial high windows, as you can see. See, I'm not used to directing it, but you can clearly tell that was the house that they used for the movies. Of course, in addition, you can see it's also made a number of changes as well. But the inside is pretty rich, I have to admit. It's definitely a rich family's house.
Yeah.
No good old secret.
I think it would have been really good though if they could have actually maintained and actually do it in the original house. I think that would have been so much better.
Well, I do find, like, you see, like there with the windows you got in the background, I do think they did that like to make it look more horror-like.
Makes it look like more like eyes.
Yeah, their intention was when they made the movie, they wanted to make the house basically like really scary looking. As you can see, it has a bizarre pumpkin-shaped like appearance to it with the eyes, especially. And these eye windows are obvious. The colors they made for them. It was supposed to give the house a much more malevolent appearance, and especially when you start watching the other films, there's never one movie in Amityville where no characters ever returned for no actors reprise their roles from the previous film. So as you get more into the films, you start realizing that the house itself is really like the only kind of character that comes back. So it becomes more of a character itself in the film series.
Yeah, it does take away from it all a lot, doesn't it? I've definitely got to watch the film. I need to.
What
see it.
Do you think he was crazy, or do you think he did hear voices?
Oh, my opinion, I just from what I know, because obviously I've not been biased by watching the film or anything. Obviously these things do happen out there. Like there is situations where people have said they've heard voices and they've been like adamant that they hear voices. Now, if he did, he did. But should he have killed his family just because they heard voices? I don't think so. That's a bit extreme, isn't it?
Robert DeFeo Jr., even prior to the murders, he already had a criminal record. So, he was not really, the best person really out there. The other reason that supposedly that drew him to murder was there's a rumor there's an old rumor that goes on. We don't know if it's actually true though, depending on, which interview you hear about Ronald DeFeo Jr. from prison, that supposedly he he actually had this plan with his older sister Dawn, and there was quite disturbing things that was actually going between the two of them. But I guess like his sister had like the sinister side to her as well, and Robert had thoughts of originally, murder, but he only really wanted to kill his father, which was Robert DeFeo Sr., because Robert DeFeo Sr. was just as bad. He was quite abusive. In fact, I mean, maybe he too may have had some mental problems. I mean, he was really more of a nutcase for the most part, and he often would usually terrorize, the younger kids. If they were being too much of a nuisance or something, he would just go on and just like slap them like hard. Like if that was today, obviously you would see that as complete child abuse. Of course, back then it was too. So his only thoughts originally was killing his father because of how he's treated them. But then afterwards, like his sister, for some reason, was basically wanting him to murder the entire family, which of course he did. And I think Dawn actually might have been the last victim, I guess, in some way, shape, or form, to somewhat like avenge the other family members, because that was not his original plan originally.
Yeah, I didn't know that. Like the information you got there.
Information that has been recently put out. I mean, I think it's really been only in the last 10 years that information has come out, because before then we didn't know anything about these other possible facts of what actually happened that night back in 1974.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that though. I mean, that does make me think maybe more on the lines that maybe, like you say, because of his father, that he did these things, and obviously it got out of control and he did end up killing everybody. But then
that's the thing. Was it the land that
maybe
was haunted, the house?
Yeah, was the land haunted, or was it him? Or I'm a big believer in that our energy, and like if there's a strong negative energy in the house, obviously if the father's been abusive and that creates that
it's not a recipe for
negative atmosphere, and which obviously spirals out of control to the point of where there was the murders, and then maybe because of all that, it has then led down to that negative paranormal activity in the future with the Lutz family.
I mean, it's typical, especially when you have a relatively abusive family member, and they abuse and neglect their own kids for a good period of time. This is something that we see with a lot of the notorious serial killers, that because of the way how they raised them, it's like that is pretty much all they know, like how they've been raised, or even if they know right from wrong and they haven't been able to have the opportunity to really move out to be on their own. Because, Robert was 23 years old by the time that he committed these murders. So he was still, I mean, despite his appearance, he was still a pretty young guy at that time. So, I think the worst part was, I think at some point something just snapped and he couldn't take it anymore.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, what's your opinions, Tommy? Do you think that maybe it influenced him, or do you think that has a big part to play of it, or do you think it's demonic and he was influenced by voices in his head?
It's really hard to say. For me personally, if you're hearing voices inside of your head, I would go towards saying it's something that's trying to trigger you, because it's all part of a possession, isn't it? It's trying to torment you to the point of where your mind will be at complete ease to their control. So eventually you'll break to the point of where you'll do as what it's asking, just to kind of get it out of your mind.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean,
you'll do anything sometimes to get rid of something.
Maybe if, like you say, maybe it is the land, and maybe that it did affect the father, which is why he was the way he was, and then had that knock-on effect. Maybe I suppose it's one of those things we will never know. It's a tragedy.
You do find there were a lot of people there with troubled backgrounds that have been in like domestic violence and that have got some sort of underlining problems in the future, and they feel like they've almost been haunted by spirits almost. Yeah,
and like Joe just said there about giving troubled spirits peace. I do think that's a big thing. Like if the house is still haunted because of what's happened, I think it's good to investigate in that. But then also with also got to try and help these spirits and help them to move on, and because nobody wants to be trapped in a place forever. Like you want to be able to move on and be at peace. And if
Well,
these
for them,
spirits,
it's like being in prison, isn't it?
yeah, I mean, and that EVPS has put there also about like investigating historic places. Like you say, you wouldn't necessarily find something, but you do. And
But this is the problem, though. The ones with the history, you want to go to. You don't want to go to other places that you know could possibly be haunted.
No, definitely.
Because no one hears about them. They always hear about Amityville or, you know, different hotels, for instance, and all that.
Yeah, definitely. Now, I'm going to play as we'll move on now to obviously the Cecil Hotel.
My favorite one. My favorite.
I could just say just one thing.
Yes,
quickly before we move on. You know, this is actually something quite interesting. But all this talk about Amityville, we've actually had in the past, because like I told you, we do a con that's called Chicago Ghost Con. We actually had one of the kids come out to our con at least twice, which he calls himself Christopher Quarantino. He does not go by Lutz. And he has definitely some of the most amazing stories about what he went through growing up in that house. And in fact, he's really the only one that really talks about what really happened when they were living there. I mean, his brother at one point did a documentary that was called My Amityville Horror, but that's the only time that he Daniel Lutz that he still uses that, and that was the only time he really ever spoke about it. So, but it's really Christopher. Missy never says anything about it. She doesn't want the attention, but
yeah,
what he told us about was just really different than what you hear from what you see in the movies or even from the book itself. I mean, you know, he said that there was paranormal activity that did occur within the house, but it's not like what you saw in the movie. Like,
yeah,
I don't think that they said that there weren't really any, flies occurring in their house despite it was the winter, or pigs looking into the windows. I mean, they said that, I think George at one point did claim that he did see red eyes, but that was as close as the truth. But they also say that supposedly George actually might have been involved in the occult. So it's almost as if the activity that actually occurred in that house was not really from the house itself. It actually came from George that was involved in Satanism and the occult.
Wow, I mean, to hear that from the horse's mouth must be brilliant. Like, I mean,
and he despises. I mean, Christopher. He despises George. I mean, he never liked him after things fell apart. He was supportive of Kathy. Because they were from a previous marriage, so he was always there for Kathy, but never for George.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, if we can track him down and
yes, Facebook, I know that for a fact. He's been on a number of shows too, so I think he'd probably be willing to talk.
If we can find him, we'll find him. We'll get him on this show. Definitely, we'll do Amityville.
Put him on Facebook. If you like, I could try to get a hold of him.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, definitely, yeah, mate. Yeah, bloody hell.
That'd be really good.
That'll be excellent. Now, to go on to another one, I say is the Cecil Hotel.
It's my favourite.
If anybody does follow Ghost Adventures, they did just do a special of the Cecil Hotel on Discovery Plus. Now, I won't ruin it for anyone. We watched it. It's pretty compelling. I mean, some of the stuff they captured was pretty good evidence. I mean, they're
either faking it or it's genuine evidence. So
yeah. If it's genuine, then that's cracking. I mean, but I will play you this, and I'm sure everybody's seen this this video before, but I will play it and we'll chat about it. There's no sound, but we'll see what people think to this. I'm sure people have seen this.
Oh yes, I know this video. Yep.
Now this is Elisa Lam. Famous case of Elisa Lam going missing, or she was missing for a while at the Cecil Hotel. Now you can see her here. She's getting into the elevator and pressing random buttons.
She's almost scared, like she's seeing if anyone's like following her. Or...
It looks like someone's like. They've also had lip readers actually watching this footage to see if she's actually what she's talking to now, they did say that her words that she was using were almost incomprehensible. Like they couldn't understand what she was actually trying to say.
They said they didn't know whether she was out of her mind because obviously she had bipolar, didn't she?
She was bipolar, yeah.
Yeah, she had a history of it.
Which could explain some of her strange behaviours here. But we also notice one thing is like the elevator door does not shut automatically. She's not touching it.
But if you watch the one on
that door should shut automatically,
yeah.
But it's not. And some of the gestures that she's about to do are strange, almost like she's trying to usher something into or out of the elevator. Now, unfortunately, after this footage, I'll let it play to the end so everybody can see what happens. It's only a couple of minutes, but this is the genuine CCTV footage of Elisa Lam. This is the last footage that was seen of her until she was found later on, unfortunately down the line, in the water tank on the roof of the hotel.
As you can see, she's pressing a load of buttons. Some people seem to think that was she trying to almost hide which floor she was going to come off.
Yeah, trying to confuse the spirits, maybe people have said. Now, unfortunately, she wasn't found for some time, and unfortunately, people had been drinking and showering in the water
and they were saying
in this
they
tank.
were complaining of bad taste.
Yeah, it tasted funny, as they would describe it. It just didn't taste normal.
No.
Yeah, and you see she's doing gestures there, almost like she's trying to do some ritual or something, trying to...
How awful as well, though, to find out you've been drinking someone.
Yeah, like the bodily fluids that, because when it comes to, death, obviously, the body starts decaying pretty rapidly, especially if it's not taken care of. And when that happens, and having the, oozing bodily fluids, it makes you wonder, how much of her body was decaying.
Yeah, exactly.
To the point when they finally found her.
What they've said as well, though, is the fact that the cover of the actual tank was big enough for her to actually fit in normally, but then for her to be able to close the lid after herself would be impossible.
Yeah, they said that the lid was so heavy that, and once she was in the tank, it would be impossible for her to then reclose it.
And her clothes were off as well. She was naked.
Now, just before we get your opinion, Tommy, as well, like there's also, when they did a post-mortem exam on her, they could not find the cause of her death. It was inconclusive.
She had bruises, didn't she? She had bruises?
No, she didn't.
Nothing.
She had no physical markings. She had no physical, like she'd been strangled or anything. Obviously, they put it down to drowning, accidental drowning in the end.
Well, they put it as accident.
Suicide. I remember hearing it was suicide.
Suicide was another one as well, and then they changed it several times on the actual. I'll see if I can find it in a minute. But on the actual post-mortem exam official document, you can see they scribbled it out several times because they could not determine the actual what they were putting it down to, whether it was murder, suicide, accident.
But then in the end, they put it as accident, didn't they?
Yeah, they put it in as accident. Now, Tommy, have you heard of the Elisa Lam? I'm sure you have, mate.
Yeah, years ago, I remember watching that video. I can't remember at what age it was, and it really baffled me, and still to this day, it does. It's, for me, completely unexplainable. I still don't know what to say about it, if I'm completely honest. As far as I would say anything, I know she was bipolar, but I don't believe it would lead you to do something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, this is the thing. I mean, she's happy. Say anything about her being.
Well, her friends apparently, because she did share a room with her friends in the hotel at first, or not necessarily her friends, but they were like a group of students sharing a room, and the students actually asked her to be moved because of her strange behaviours that she was portraying. I mean, could that be her bipolar? Could she have been in contact with something that was more demonic? Now, I'll lead on to something else in a minute, but we'll get you. What about you, Nick? I mean, obviously, you must have seen this video before.
Yeah, I have. And you know what? I was just looking up something about the Cecil Hotel. This is just kind of I actually got goosebumps reading this. Of course, I'm sure you guys are familiar with that. This wasn't really the first suicide to have occurred at that hotel. I mean, I'm looking right now, and there was a number of other deaths that occurred within the walls of this hotel that I didn't even know about. So the fact that, you know, her death that occurred was, I mean, first off, with how she died, you know, and where they found her was quite unusual. But, you know, it's almost like as if there's like some type of curse almost that's inhabiting this hotel that makes all these people like want to commit suicide. I mean, here's the earliest one I found. I didn't know about this one. So it says here, he was from our city. On November 19th, 1931, Manhattan Beach resident W.K. Norton, age 46, was found dead in his room after ingesting poison capsules. A week prior, he had checked into the Cecil under the name James Willis from Chicago. Norton's death appears to be the earliest known suicide at the hotel.
Yeah, and there's many more. I mean, there's a lady who had a fight with her husband,
One actually,
left him a suicide note and jumped from the window.
Yep. There was already like another one that occurred a year after the first one. In September 1932, a maid found Benjamin Dodich, age 25, dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. He did not leave a suicide note. And the other weird part is, in addition to Elisa Lam, she's no longer the most recent suicide to have occurred, because 2 years later, another suicide, which is the most recent, had occurred, which was on June 13, 2015. The body of a 28-year-old man was found outside the hotel. Some conjectured he may have committed suicide by jumping from the hotel, although a spokesperson for the county coroner informed the LA Times that the cause of death had not been determined.
Well, I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Unfortunately, this hotel was plagued. Joe, I just quickly put this. Joe's just put that she seems like she was possessed and not in control of herself, and it does look like that from the video. It looks like she is. Her behavior is so strange, and that's what people can't understand.
The way she moves her hands, though, not like a normal person.
What she was doing, like constantly looking in that, and for nobody to even walk past, or there's nobody else on that corridor. It wasn't like she was.
I believe it was possible with her having bipolar. Maybe she was more easily targeted.
Like they do say they target the vulnerable. Now there's
because she did have bipolar too. Maybe her actions then would have just seemed normal to people, so they wouldn't have think of it, making it so easy to seem like an accident.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. Now there's something else I found out about Cecil that I didn't know until I did the research and watched the program. I'll drop this guy's image on the screen. You've probably seen this guy before.
Yeah, I think I know who you're about to bring up.
No, this guy.
Yep, Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker.
Now, if you can see on his hand here, he has a pentagram actually burnt into his hand. Now, this guy was a Satanist who stayed in the hotel, and he was a serial killer, unfortunately. He was known as the Night Stalker, and he actually kills people while actually staying in this hotel. He was, known Satanist. He used handguns, knives, machete, a tire iron, and a hammer to murder his victims. His crimes are so sinister that the judge described the murders as cruelty, callousness, and viciousness beyond any human understanding. Now, that point, what you saw there is the picture of him being led away when he was convicted of guilty.
And he's smiling about it.
He's smiling and shows no remorse at all. And he actually says "Hail Satan" as he's being led away, which is.
They think that he could have been a massive playing part in her death and a lot of the earlier deaths from her.
Yeah, I mean, so far they've convicted him for at least 13 different deaths, of families. But there's other ones that they also believe he might have also been responsible for.
Yeah,
responsible for.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's crazy. I didn't know about this guy. I mean, it says here also he died on death row at San Quentin prison, age 53 years old.
In 2013, so not actually that
in
really that long
2030,
ago.
so he hasn't. he didn't die that long ago, but it's just maybe, and apparently he did conduct satanic rituals inside the hotel as well, which some people believe maybe have had the effect on Elisa Lam
Yes,
and future people.
He did some drawings, didn't they?
Yeah, he's done some horrific drawings that you can see online that he drew while in prison and while in hotel.
Zach has 2 of them on Ghost Adventure.
Zach has everything.
Yeah, Richard Ramirez, in my opinion, he's definitely one of the scariest serial killers I've ever researched. Just the way how he broke into people's homes. Innocent people that these were people that he never even knew. So it's just such a disturbing aspect that while he was staying at reality, I should say, that while he was a guest at the Cecil at night, he would then go out randomly out in different neighborhoods and just get into break through one of their houses and just do unthinkable, unimaginable things that none of us would ever think about. I mean, they always had, despite the fact that they put strict curfews, they told everybody to lock their doors and windows, keep all their kids inside once it hit nightfall. I mean, he always found a way to try to break into some of these houses. So it almost created that kind of fear, like you aren't really completely safe. I mean, you see that a lot in movies. You only think that occurs in movies, but in reality, there's people out there that do such a thing. So there's always that question about, do we lock the doors and lock the windows? But then all of a sudden, when something like this happens, you kind of question almost as if say, does it even really matter?
Yeah, exactly. It's horrific.
Just one thing off of topic that just popped into my head, right? What is it with movies, right? You hear a noise in the basement or the attic, and the person goes to the noise. Who does that?
I do.
You don't do that. You'd be running out of the house.
That is a good point.
Stupid people.
Unless you're Zach, then you just send Aaron to go and investigate, and then happy days.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you name Aaron and you're on Ghost Adventure, then unfortunately you're the one who's going.
Yeah.
Now there is actually another guy, Nick, you probably know this other guy as well, who was another serial killer that stayed in this hotel. His name, I'll bring it up on here so people can see, Jack Unterweger. Now some people call him the copycat of Ramirez, because it was after the
it was afterwards in 1991 that he stayed.
Yeah, in 1991. He was an Austrian serial killer. He murdered 11 prostitutes in Vienna, Prague, Los Angeles, often by strangling them to death with their own underwear between 1990 and 1992. His first murder was in 1974. What else does it say here? Tied him to was eventually arrested, and that's the reason why he stayed in this hotel, was that he later on admitted was because of Ramirez. He was a fan of Ramirez's work, which is just
so really why would you have let him go in a hotel knowing full well that's where he wanted to go?
It's
as a fan.
It's
you
just
wouldn't
horrendous.
be giving him his wishes.
It's horrendous.
Yeah, I mean, Richard Ramirez, he had a number of fans, especially female admirers. I mean, if you look at like his mugshot pictures, he had kind of like that 80s rocker like star appearance, the long hair, just that rock star look. And it's it was so disgusting to me. Even one of the jurors liked the guy. So you think to yourself, for God's sakes, this individual broke in, killed all these innocent. He killed at least one child. So he's also a partial child killer. Why would you like someone who did terrible things?
Yeah, it's so disturbing, isn't it? And it says there about about Jack that he actually, on the night of his sentencing, he hanged himself behind bars by using the same knot that he used to strangle his victims, almost as in a way to admit his guilt, sort of thing, but then get away with it at the same time.
I suppose at least he kind of died the way that he was killing people, but then it still doesn't bring real justice, though, does it? Really, he should have.
No. There's many more.
It even says by the time of Ramirez's death, I mean, just looking at this, and this was still going on by the time of his death, he was engaged to Christine Lee, who was 23 years old, a 23-year-old female writer. And it says by some estimates, he would have been in his early 70s before his execution was carried out due to California's lengthy appeals process. I'm thinking, oh my God, someone at 23 still liking this guy? I'd be like, are you kidding me?
I know, it's disturbing, isn't it?
I know you like Bad Boys and stuff like that, but then it takes it to a new level.
There's many others, not necessarily serial killers, but there's many other murders. Anyone's heard of Pigeon Goldie?
Yeah.
She's a famous lady. Tommy, you've heard of her, definitely, yeah. She was murdered. She was actually raped and murdered in one of the rooms in the hotel, which is just absolutely horrendous.
It makes sense with all these murders and all the murders that stayed there, why it would be so haunted. I think in a way, how much
there's so much negative energy that's thrown around it from that.
Yeah, definitely. And like we've been saying about these places, I do think our actions impact on the energy in that building or that area. So when we're talking of like haunted locations, it doesn't have to be a building. It doesn't have to be a basement or all this stuff. It just, when anything
tragic's happened
on that negative level, it leaves behind that energy, that negative energy. So you can go back to things like battlefields and stuff like that, where like hundreds and hundreds of people were killed on an area of land. You go back to Native Americans, their burial grounds where they conducted rituals. I do all of these things,
and you feel sorry as well for the spirits and that obviously are there, stuck there, because we say they're stuck there. They might not be, but let's say for instance they were. They don't want to be there.
Of course not. No,
they don't want to be
actually reliving their deaths. Like,
yeah, and I do think that's maybe why we get so many like negative spirits, like because they're almost trapped because of the situation is so tragic. But maybe if they died so tragically, maybe they don't even know they're dead, and they're so stuck that they can't move on.
Or they had unfinished business.
Whereas if you die peacefully, like hopefully we all will in our sleep or something, then maybe you move on a lot easier because you've accepted that it's your time and that. But Joe, she agrees there as well. I mean, what's your opinion, Tommy? Do you think that maybe like it's the more negative hauntings because of these situations, or?
Oh yeah, 100%. The way I would see it is, everybody's got a time of when they're going to pass, and I feel like in that time you're able to accept it and move on. But if you're suddenly killed or you're murdered or whatever, you can't accept that sort of thing. It's hard to move on from that. You had, like Amy said, unfinished business, which you want to complete. So I believe it's nice to be able to go and help those spirits that need to be freed to be let on, so they can let go and move on freely.
Yeah.
I do believe that those sort of energies there do charge a negative energy because of all the, I guess, sadness. I guess you could say that might be the right word. That's kind of lingering around.
Yeah, and anger towards the situation as well. It was out of hands.
That's just brought me good on to another one I've just seen here. That another tragic situation that happened in the Cecil Hotel. You've probably seen this one, Nick, as well.
Oh, this is all out the window, is it?
Unfortunately, if people are a bit squeamish, then please put your fingers in your ears.
One by any chance.
But tragically, in 1944, one of the youngest victims to die at the hotel was actually a newborn baby. Dorothy Purcell was 19 years old. She was staying as a guest in the hotel when she threw her newborn son from a window. Apparently, she did not know she was pregnant and woke in the middle of the night with stomach pains.
She didn't know she was pregnant.
I mean, how you don't understand you're pregnant for night, I don't know. But she didn't want to.
It's just all that food I'm eating, guys.
She didn't want to wake her partner at the time, So she went into the bathroom and delivered the baby herself. And she believed that the baby was dead when it was delivered.
I think she's a liar. I think that baby was alive.
And then she decided to throw the baby out the window. I mean,
and I bet she thought, I'm 19 years old. How am I going to look after this baby? How can I get rid of it? Or
kid herself, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? She was arrested, but after psychologists determined she was mentally confused. She was eventually found not guilty by reason of insanity.
Wow.
Away with it.
I think she's a liar.
Yeah, that's pretty insane. I mean, that was one of the newest deaths. I mean, well, stories I came across when I was looking at the list. So I can sure understand why she was charged with murder, although it was kind of bizarre, of course, at the same time of how her partner, who was also like almost 20 years older than she was, you know, you kind of wonder, like, how on earth would he not have heard what was going on? Because all babies cry right, you know, from the start. So he would have heard. He should have heard something at least.
Or heard her at least pushing.
Yeah, you'd have heard her. You'd hear something. Hi, keep it real spiritual. How are you doing?
That's Bob and Sally Ann Hunt who run it. So, hey, Bob and Sally, good to see you guys.
Thank you for joining us, guys. Brilliant.
I was on there a couple months ago, so I know them very well.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, thank you for coming on, guys. But yeah, it's just tragic, and the list goes on and on. I mean, I'm sure there's many more deaths and suicides, unfortunately.
There's too much discrepancies in what she's saying. Like, she didn't know she was 9 months pregnant.
But what really gets me is if, you did give birth to the baby and it was unfortunately dead, why were you going to throw it out the window? What I don't understand her logic of doing that. What that was.
I think she probably would have been at least mentally disturbed, and of course, obviously, at only 19 years old, you know, I guess it was almost like as if a switch went off. Like, you know, am I really, you know, at my age, am I really ready to have a kid? But you know, you don't do something like that. That's for sure.
I mean, it could even come down to the fact that it could have something to do with her partner. I mean, or maybe he didn't want the child. Maybe the child was of someone else's.
Or did someone tell her to do it?
Yeah, this comes back to, again, the Lisa Lam thing. Was she influenced?
Yeah.
And it's funny, I'm sure that the room that she was in was the room opposite to Richard Ramirez's room when he stayed there.
Correct, yeah.
Which is a little bit... Yeah, it's a little bit of a coincidence.
Ramirez was not even born yet at that time.
Exactly. Now, that is a bit strange. Maybe he heard about the story and wanted to be near to that potential sacrifice. But it's just disturbing. The more you read about the Cecil Hotel, the more disturbing.
Well, it makes sense though, because they do say that, like, Satanists, they need to have a sacrifice and they like it to be like
newborn child.
Child. So it makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, he was probably one of the sickest Satanists I've ever heard of. But
if I could just say one other thing about Richard Ramirez quickly, this was actually something that occurred at his trial. It says on August 14th, the trial was interrupted because one of the jurors, Phyllis Singletary, did not arrive at the courtroom. Later that day, she was found shot to death in her apartment. The jury was terrified as they could not help wondering whether Ramirez had somehow directed this event from inside his prison cell and whether he could reach other jurors. So it's like you even had, you know, those that were going to, you know, have him locked up for life or have him sent to death row. It's like as if they already had like a price they had to pay. Like, you know, it was like he was trying to send that message, you know, if you keep doing this, you know, I'm gonna figure out some way to kill you or something like that.
Yeah, I haven't heard that. Have you heard that before, Tommy?
No, first time I've heard that.
Yeah. Well, it says here now saying that, however, it was ultimately determined that Ramirez was not responsible for Singletary's death, as she was shot and killed by her boyfriend, who later committed suicide with the same weapon in a hotel. It doesn't say what hotel it is, but that too also occurred at a hotel.
That's crazy. It shows you, like, I mean, I wouldn't want to work in a hotel, thank you very much.
Yeah, the alternate juror who replaced Singletary was too frightened to return to her home. Yikes! I probably would too.
Yeah, I mean, in a case like that, when you're dealing with one of the most like notorious serial killers that has ever been on this planet, I mean, you've got to be pretty brave to be that juror for that.
Yeah.
It's just horrendous, and even just to sit there through the evidence and not let that bother you for the. I'm sure it would. I mean,
I feel sorry for the ones that actually have to go there and actually see these scenes.
Yeah, I mean,
and have to take photos and
like the Pigeon Goldie, the lady that was tragically raped and murdered in her rooms. They actually on the ghost mentioning they speak to the guy who was the photographer for the evidence, the murder scene evidence, and that guy, how you cannot let that affect you for the rest of your life, I don't know. I mean,
yeah,
that's horrific. I do. Like, hats off to these people that have to do these things. I mean,
I suppose someone's got to do it, but I definitely wouldn't want to do it.
Yeah.
Well, you know, with the Cecil Hotel, I'm sure you guys know this. 5 years ago now, of course, American Horror Story decided to do a season at the hotel, which was filmed inside and out. And I remember hearing when they aired the Halloween episode of AHS, where they had all these notorious serial killers, come together on Halloween. I mean, that got a lot of controversy in that. I mean, there was not that many people who were really enjoying that, because for God's sakes, these were people that, because you got families who still have to relive, every day of their families, their family members, their friends who were murdered, 25, 30 years ago. It was almost as if this was just like such a way too soon moment. So when they brought all these killers in, I remember watching it the first time. It's like, oh boy, they're going a little too far with this. Like this is not good.
Yeah, there's a lot of controversy with Horror Story, but I do recommend people to watch the seasons, because I do think they are amazing.
Yeah,
they're really good.
So that's something I've never watched, but I kind of like not watching these things, because I like to see the facts first before I see the fiction, if that makes sense. I like to know what actually happened before I see the dramatized event. But like you say, Nick, I think like they do go too far sometimes. I think you've got to be sympathetic, like you say, to these people, these families that are still living with it to this day, and their relatives that have to carry on, and then you're almost making these people out to be like these film stars, these serial killers, and it's like, Jesus.
One thing when they're making a dramatization movie about what really happened, of course, sometimes that doesn't always go as planned, but usually, most of the time, they usually will get permission from the families of the victims. They usually would say, is it okay if we do this? We're not trying to offend you or anything. We're just making basically like a kind of like a period film, but they usually would normally ask permission to do that. When you watch like that episode of AHS, you can clearly tell that it looked like as if they sanctioned it. Well, from what I remember hearing, all these families of these victims, they didn't sanction it, and they didn't approve of it either. So basically, it's like they just kind of decided that this was going to be their own thing. And I don't think so far as far from what I've seen, I don't think I've ran into anyone who said that they enjoyed that part of the show.
Really? Wow.
It was just too soon.
Yeah. Have you watched them, Tommy? Have you watched American Horror Story ones?
It's not for me personally. I've got to be completely honest.
I think you're on the same level as me, mate.
Got weak stomach.
Yeah, pretty much.
I mean, there has to be that boundary. I think that it's entertainment, and then when entertainment goes too far, I mean, and you're actually.
It all depends. It all depends on the person, though. What you enjoy and what you don't enjoy.
Yeah, each your own. If you enjoy it, and then happy days. If you liked watching the American Horror Story ones, then happy days.
Just don't force it upon me.
Yeah, and like you say, Nick, I think that majority of people do think that was probably a bit too far. Like going with that.
And then these were, it's like half of these killers that they had didn't even have anything to do with the Cecil Hotel.
All right, thank you guys. Thank you for joining us. We're literally about to go anyway, but there will be a part 2 next Friday night, definitely, of this. But yeah, thank you for joining us, guys. Enjoy the lockdown. I hope you get some cracking evidence.
I'd highly recommend them too to come on the show because they're great. They're awesome.
Yeah, by all means, guys, if you want to come on the show, drop us a message. We'll certainly have you on. We'll have anybody on. Just drop us a message on our Instagram or YouTube or wherever, and we'll get back to you, and we'll love to have you on. Definitely.
I definitely think we need to do a part 2 though, because
yeah, we have unfortunately ran out of time tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah, Nick can't wait for this one. But yeah, there's a quick before we all go, a quick like reveal thing. We've got some plans to actually start doing podcasting of our own shows. Now, we were thinking of podcasting this show, but we thought of doing something totally different. So we're thinking of podcasting like people's evidence and stuff, and paranormal news, and
having Mama Cass on, and and tarot card reading and stuff like that.
Yeah, and we're also going to start doing videos of like reactions to people's evidence. So if people watching this, if you've got any evidence you've captured or any pictures, anything, like send us it to it or drop us a link to see it.
We're going to try and debunk it.
We're going to do a few reaction videos to it and drop them on our channel and see where that goes. So we're growing and we're gonna expand. We're gonna expand in a bit. No worries, Charlotte. Thank you for joining us at the last minute. Anyway, please rewatch it. It's been a cracking show with Tommy and Nick as always. But yeah, so thank you for joining us, guys. Nick, pleasure you coming on as always. Tommy, excellent, great first live show, mate. Thank you so much for joining us.
No problem. It's been a good one.
And I'll see you in the morning, nice and early, mate.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And we'll see you all next week, part 2.
Yeah, next Friday night, 8 p.m. our time. What time is it your time, Nick, when you start?
It's 3 o'clock here.
3 o'clock next time. So if you're out in Chicago, it's 3 o'clock.
Yeah, it's pretty bright out still. Although it's been snowing.
Can't play background.
Yeah. So
yeah, I know. It looks like it's dark, but it actually isn't.
Yeah, thank you for joining us, guys, and we'll see you next week. All the best.